1999, during the NATO occupation in Serbia. When this started, there was an exodus of people who were fleeing in Kosovo, particularly from the city of Pristina. And one family left their small child of 18 months for dead. He was actually not dead. The Serbs found him, gave him a heroic Serbian name, Zoran, then later had to abandon him as the NATO troops moved in. So Albanians adopted him, gave him another heroic name, Lirim, which means freedom. So there were a number of things that interested me in the story, of course, which was this way that it was used as a kind of national allegory. And that's why I wrote the material in the form of a ballad, or an anti-ballad, if you like, because, of course, it isn't the heroic mode that would be used in the traditional kind of literature. But I was also interested in the fact that the child was about to speak. You know, he was about 18 months. He didn't speak yet, which is one of the things that has been a preoccupation in Post-Partum Document, is how do you enter into the language and culture? What is it that happens as a child learns to speak and kind of separates from the mother in terms of a relation that you can't see, like weaning from the breast, but it's something that is a moment where the child can use a syntax. They're able to make that separation. Well, here's a child at that point, but also you can see so clearly that it's not just the question of sexual identity, but there's an ethnicity being mapped into that structure of difference right then, at that moment. And that the kind of conflicts in this much wider sense also are very, personally, it's very emotionally charged for me to see something that's as precarious and vulnerable as this kind of moment of the child's kind of entry into that world. When those conditions are circumscribed by the traumatic and catastrophic, conditions of war, it seems something that is necessary. It just seemed necessary for me to go there, and that's why I show it in this exhibition with Post-Partum Document, because you move out of the intimacy of the home in a certain way, but not out of the structure of the family, but you are able to consider the question of nationality and ethnicity as it's mapped onto that. I think is important in terms of my work. We get caught up in describing what it's about, right? But how you understand that when you see it, for me, is what's important. I mean, I don't write things in a book, obviously, and so I think of the textual material as also an image. It matters how it's done. So the ballad is done in lint from the dryer, and it was very hard for me to think of how I could represent something that seems so traumatic, so ephemeral, and because this stuff was there, but so unimportant, right? I thought it seemed the perfect way to do this, and so to come up with a process of casting the text. Nothing is stamped on, it's just cast in lint in the dryer. And I do the whitewash first and then the black wash, and it comes out in intaglio. But these are kind of assisted, ready-made processes. Like the document, everything is fairly ephemeral material and things that are very intimately related to the home, to domestic labor. And so there's all of that which should carry almost as much weight for me as a story. with the latest piece, you see that it's kind of returned to the site of World War II, because what I was describing about the political primal scene in relation to the younger artists that I'd been working with, I suddenly thought, well, why has my generation cut ourselves off completely from our past? You know, it's like a complete denial. And at the same time, there are all these ways that you could describe the earliest life in the family, which is structured not necessarily just around what your parents say, but their actions and their omissions. And I'd remember my partner saying, when a plane flew over, well, it sounds like a bomber. And I'd say, yes, but you weren't born. So why do you say that? You weren't born. So that you know something was passed on in a gesture of some sort. So in that work, I just kind of set out just to look at the consequences for people, not who were involved, but who were born at that time. And the kind of narratives that I've used are not your usual testimonials. They're very odd things, because I didn't ask people. They're kind of found. Well, I mean, they come up in conversation, you know, completely without prompting. The person who told me that his parents he's Japanese, they lived in Peru, but Japanese Peruvians were sent to concentration camps in Houston. Something that's very little known, that the US government offered money to all Latin American countries to send the Japanese to the US. I believe only Peru and Ecuador complied, and no one else. But there are all these kind of anomalies. So it's more what was told to me. I feel that juxtaposing the work made me think more about this question of the voice than I ever had before, because I had to think what actually made those work together, and why it is that with the beginning of so-called identity politics, that the voice, narrative, and performativity, you know, really are central somehow to the realization of those project-based works.